welcome everyone. While the session is titled "Growth in India being organic or inorganic," which is the best way to go. As we kept liaising with the speakers and getting their thoughts, we kind of figured that inorganic is possibly what's more prevalent, what's more in numbers, and what people want to know about a lot more. So we're actually going to be focusing on a lot on inorganic today. At the end of it, we'll have a Q&A session as well. So we'll have a lot of time for questions. We'll be starting off with Ajay Sethi. Ajay is the managing partner of ASA and CCI. They do a lot of transactions into India. So Ajay will be focusing on that bit.
Morning, everybody. In the morning, we all speakers got together and we were deciding the order of talking. And Frank very kindly said, I'm going to only speak for 5 minutes, and he wanted me probably to reduce my speaking time. And as a good Indian, I told him, very good, then I'll take away some of your time. So thank you very much, Frank. So let's, what the topic given to us was organic and inorganic. So basically, it boils down to buy or build. So we are talking more about buy today. If you want to come into India and you want to get into the buying mode of companies, what happens, what are the challenges, and what's happening on the landscape there. So moving on to this issue now. Now all of you since yesterday have been hearing about India stories. So you've heard the GDP, you've heard how fantastic we are and why you should come and everything. So I'll spare you that. But India's middle class growth is something of a phenomena which is building up. And I don't think it's been given adequate attention. And there are facts. The biggest internet market, the fastest growing internet market is now India. The largest market for smartphones is predicted to be India by 2017. And these kind of growth rates are clearly visible. These are signs. And therefore, at the cost of talking a little bit more, I'm going to take 2-3 slides just to give you a visual, just a quick visual. This is how the middle class looked. If you look at this slide, you will see on the left-hand side, that shows a pie chart. The middle class was actually sitting primarily in US and Europe. And this is McKinsey. McKinsey had made this report in 2007. And you see the last chart, which talks 2030. And you see the middle class is jumping across all the way to Asia. China will be where the maximum middle class growth is going to be seen, but India is touted to be the second biggest market. And the spending, which is what counts for a company investing into India, the spending is supposedly 40% going to be in Asia. And therefore, I just want to, and you see that last chart, which is the one on the corner there with that long building growing there, that's the spending which is presumed to be happening in Asia. And therefore, just the last slide out here. This is a very interesting slide. I mean, I have knocked out, this is a presentation I had done in Zurich some while back, and I just selected just a bit from there. And this one is a very telling slide. This is facts. This is where the Indian spending is dramatically started growing and is predicted to go up significantly. So these are sectors because the government is likely to support certain sectors to grow. So logistics, healthcare, infrastructure goes without saying, smart city and other things have been touted about. So these are the sectors where the government will put some attention, and the favorable policies will probably move in this direction. You can't create a smart city without giving incentive to somebody to come across. And smart city is a whole concept by itself. I can debate about smart city, but we'll spare you that. So let's get into the build and buy issue which we had spoken about. And while build is of course a traditional way of growing a business in India, buy is what we are seeing a lot of movement now. And a good proof that India has matured is the most conservative businessmen, and many of you would agree, I do a lot of business with Japanese, they have started buying in India. Now that's a rarity. And if that's moving, then something's happening. So organic and organic is you set up a subsidiary, set up a branch, set up a liaison office. But the focus really is, if you talk mergers, you're really talking about you buying a shares or you're stripping down assets. And of course, there's a variety of things which goes around that. It's not that much vanilla. And Frank might be looking at me and saying, he really doesn't know what he's talking about. But there you go. There's some more stuff there. That's the merger aspect. You find an Indian partner. He says, I'm going to put my land with you. You say, I'm going to get some money across. We're going to pool in our resources. And then a merger situation occurs. The top 5 reasons we have seen why inorganic growth or buys work in India. They are different from the Western world. Distribution channels, they are already very complicated distribution channels in India. Some are extremely inaccessible. So one of the ways of getting into a distribution channel is a buy method. If you are dealing with the government and government contracts and tenders, now dealing with the government of India can be sometimes testing, not always, but sometimes. And therefore, to have an Indian partner who could help you go through this maze of questions and paths and all is always very useful. And this is the traditional method which you have seen many of the companies, infrastructure companies which have come to India have used this particular route. Labor intensive industry, if you want to handle labor, it's pretty useful to have an Indian partner, because managing labor is not just about money matters. There's a cultural issues, there are caste issues, there are location issues, there is huge amount of issues which an Indian partner would understand. It doesn't mean you can't deal, you can hire a good manager, but an Indian partner would be pretty useful there. And speed to market, we will show you some examples of speed to market issues which have happened, and British companies who have done speed to market entries. 2010 was a good year, 2006 was a fantastic year for M&A transactions in India, and we are seeing transactions moving up again, both in the private equity side and into private equity. Of course, we have seen fantastic transactions because of startups in India. Huge amount of traction there, but other side we are seeing, I think this year till June, in hospitality we had 6 transactions which have happened on M&A side compared to 1 last year. So there is traction moving in on that particular front. I'll leave this slide, I'll just jump in. Again, I believe Frank's going to be touching on this. So I'll just give you a sample. Some of these deals have worked very well. So Tata Motors, Jaguar, it started on a tough note, but very well negotiated. They took the entire labor into confidence, they went into a discussion with them, and then they took KPMG and Roland Berger and they went into cost cutting. This is a fantastic story of well thought of transaction. Diageo is a quick market access story I was telling you about, and it's a fantastic, I mean, Diageo has predicted India to become its 2nd largest market in the next 5 years. So this is a great success story. Schroders coming into and taking into Axis Mutual Fund is another financial services story which one can talk about. So now just coming to the last few slides, when an M&A happens in India, what are really the challenges? This is what today's discussion is all about. Finding the right partner is one of the biggest challenges, and it's not just, I'm talking to people from UK and some people from India, but if you were to talk to Germans and you talk to Japanese or you talk to Americans, these are the challenges which will hit you right there. Getting the right partner is one of the biggest challenges, and then having a true analysis, or shall I say a creditworthiness check or a promoter check done, is a bigger one. What you see on upfront on the company, because you can, in India we like lots of companies. We accountants love a lot of companies. It's a bread and butter for us. But these lots of companies can sometimes be very difficult to break down. So therefore, a proper study: is there a company which is sitting there which has been used as a siphoning mechanism or for dropping out money? Is this one of them sitting there? That's what one should do at the start itself. It's too late if you start thinking about it after 2 months. Valuations: there might be too much value being promised. Management control. Now this is where I always educate my clients from outside of India. Be sensitive. It's owner versus manager. For an Indian family-owned business to suddenly start thinking he's going to become a manager is a huge shift. And if you handle it sensitively, you'll have a wonderful partner. But you have to handle it with great sensitivity. And this is where sometimes they get very challenged. Negotiations in India, they are top-down. You're sitting in a meeting and the Indian, you say, okay, what about this particular idea? And you expect them to huddle and think and all, and the owner from the other side will say, okay, fine, I'm good with it. What's your reaction? And then you suddenly are saying, wow. Now because you want to get into your huddle and he's expecting your answer. This is something very unique to family-owned businesses out here. They normally will do a very quick decision across the table, and then they'll expect you to reciprocate. There's a different story that after 2 days he might question his own decision which he took on the first day. Corporate governance, regular MIS systems, board meetings. Many of my Indian family-owned businesses, they will agree to all these things, but trust me, in the back of the mind they're saying, this is all hogwash. We know how to run the business from gut call. So therefore, their attitude towards MIS and things, when they're even agreeing with you, is very different from what they really believe in. And if it's a process, you must learn to walk with them. It'll work very well. They will ultimately get around to it. So quick critical focus areas, get a valuation agreed quickly. Management control, it's very critical because we Indians just love designations. I mean, I have my partners here and we are all partners, but I love to be called a managing partner, and there are lots of people like my kind of ego out there. So if you've got to grow, you've got to break it down a bit. So you must say who's going to be the chairman, who's going to be the managing director, who's going to be the director of procurement. It's going to solve a lot of future problems if you do this in the term sheet stages, the initial stages. Protection clauses, non-compete clauses, and clauses to do with intellectual property right protection. Discuss this very clearly at the start. Trust me, these are the bone of lots of issues later. Preemptive rights, if you're going to put rights that we are going to do a creeping acquisition, we are going to acquire you slowly, it's best to define the mechanism of how you value the future thing. Believe me, this is another critical area where a problem comes in. You decide, okay, we'll acquire you after 5 years, and then they sit down and say, oh, by the way, the methodology of acquisition, I want this one to be the valuation of this, and then you'll define the basic rules there. And of course, you should have good people, preferably like my company, but that I leave it entirely to you. Time frames normally runs about, it's a 8 to 9 month cycle before an entire transaction will complete. But if you already have an identified partner and you are going to move, you can shave off about 2 to 3 months off from there. You could do it possibly in 5 months, but keep yourself 8 to 9 months if you're going to do a transaction across. Now, having done that, I cannot resist but market myself, so 30 seconds for hardcore marketing. We are an Indian accounting and consulting firm. We have about 600 people across India and 24 partners. We have grown organically and inorganically, so we have done 5 mergers ourselves. So I'm very often called to the Institute of Chartered Accountants to come and talk about how did we manage a merger. We are one of the only few companies which have done 6 mergers and not managed to yet spoil any one of them. And of course, we have our global tie-ups. We are part of M&A Worldwide. We are also part of Swiss Global Enterprises, so that I leave it. And finally, this one, I'd like to just highlight this person. He was the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India in '91. He was the architect of the famous liberalization budget along with Montek Singh Ahluwalia and Dr. Manmohan Singh. He is the chairman of my board of directors. And that's Mr. Arjun Asrani, earlier ambassador to Japan. We do a lot of business with Japan. So, and rest of all these smiling faces, these are all the consultants you want to avoid, and therefore I will not go into the detail. Thank you very much. I hope I have set the tone rolling, and I'm sure Frank and others will add tremendous value to this particular session. Thank you very much.